Number 5, the Shadow Doll. Coming up on the number 5 spot today is part of the collection owned by the late Ed and Lorraine Warren, big top 5 scary fan favorites. One of the first items you'll see when entering the Warrens' Haunted Museum is this terrifying little shadow doll made of bird feathers and real human teeth. The Warrens' son-in-law and current proprietor of the now defunct museum, Tony Spera, offers a little bit of insight on the doll, saying it was originally acquired at an antique shop where it was being sold, with the owners of the shop being none the wiser of the doll's evil. That's completely on the antique shop owner though. You come into a possession of a doll made of bird feathers and human teeth, your first instinct should not be to stick a price tag on it. You should toss it into the ocean or burn it, something like that. Spera claims that the doll's curse works by taking a photograph of the doll, and then when it develops, you write the curse that you'd like to inflict on the back of the photo, and you send that to your victim. And the person who opens the envelope and sees the doll in the photograph will invite the curse into your home. Now, probably a lot of pictures of the shadow doll behind me, or pictures of the shadow doll being interspersed in this video right now. I just want to tell you, I don't have any curses in mind. I didn't write any curses down. I don't have a negative thought inside my head, buddy. I barely have thoughts inside my head as is. If I would curse you with anything, I would curse you to always find loose change, always get texts back from your crush, and I'd curse you to always make the right amount of pasta. I'd only curse you good things. Now, the real question I have to ask about this scary shadow doll is, do you think it's jealous that it's not the most famous haunted doll in the Warrens Museum? I know I would probably have a very hard time sitting next to Annabelle all day. Everyone's coming to gawk and take photos at my movie star sister. Ugh, hard life. Nobody's gonna make any movies about me. No wonder that doll was cursing people. And if you're looking for more stories about cursed dolls, I've got lots and lots and lots and lots of those. And I've got lots of other scary things too. Aliens, ghouls, goblins, conspiracies, just about anything you can think up. I've done a video or two on it. So hit subscribe. Please make sure you hit that little bell as well. That means you get every one of the videos we make. But do that at the end of this video if you wouldn't mind, because I got 4 more crazy cursed objects coming up for you right about now. Number 4, cursed Ballista Balls. Like, the last couple years had everybody acting pretty strange. I think it was unprecedented times. Maybe you binged all of Tiger King in a day. Maybe you got really into making sourdough. Maybe you returned a cursed artifact you stole when you were a teenager. We all went through some personal development. In 2020, a source that chooses to remain anonymous returned an ancient artifact that they'd stolen as a teenager to the Israeli government. A Bronze Age ballista ball fired during the Great Jewish Revolt by the Romans. The thief swiped them as a teenager when visiting with a group of friends and went on to live a fairly normal life, a successful career, found a partner, sired some children. Throughout his entire life, he felt as if there was a weight over him, as if he had some invisible presence of guilt weighing down on him forever. And he said no matter how long it had been, or how much his life had moved past this childhood act of delinquency, his heart could never move on from it, and he felt as if he'd been cursed to forever bear the guilt of it. During the events of the last few years, he said it stirred in him this apocalyptic feeling that made him want to return the ballista balls in the hopes of finally clearing his conscience. Do you think at any point during all that fun stuff during the quarantine and everything, do you think he was ever worried that he might have accidentally done it by moving those ballista balls and that's why he had to put them back? Through Facebook, he ended up getting put towards the right channels within the government to return it. But you know what's really bizarre about this bizarre story? This isn't even the first time this has happened, because in 2015 an almost identical story played out. In 2015, 2 ballista balls were returned to Israeli authorities alongside a note stating, "I took these in 1995 from a residential quarter at the foot of the summit. They have brought me nothing but trouble. Please do not steal antiquities." Well, I've got to say it's a nice change of pace to hear about people trying to undo a curse before anything got too heated. And you know what? I like these stories. It's a very easy to follow message for those of us listening at home. Don't steal antiquities. Unless you're Indiana Jones, that should be some pretty easy advice to follow in your life. Number 3, the Crying Boy painting. Some of my favorite cursed objects are a good haunted painting. Maybe it's because I had a huge fondness for Ghostbusters 2 as a little guy, and it's got a haunted painting as the main bad guy of that movie. Maybe it's just because I'm very enticed by the uncanny valley of a pair of eyes that you can look at but can never look at you back. We'll probably mention that in therapy next time. Anyway, case in point, take a look at this painting, the Crying Crying Boy. Looks like a fairly normal painting, wouldn't look too out of place in your dentist's office. It's not really my kind of art, but I'm sure a generation of grannies loved to put this in the parlor. It's been the center of a series of strange coincidences that are just too darn odd to be true. It was painted by an Italian painter, one Giovanni Bragolin, and mass-produced as a print across the 50s, so everyone could enjoy this sad crying boy in the comfort of their own home until they would burn down. Because for some bizarre, possibly paranormal reason, firefighters around Essex, London would report that frequently, amidst smoldering ruins of a burned down house, repeatedly they would find the crying boy painting completely untouched by the flames, even when everything else had burned to ash. Now, this happens once, that's bizarre. 2, very strange. If this happens 3 times, you've got yourself an outright paranormal mystery on your hands. The British tabloid The Sun loved the story and was spreading stories of the cursed paintings like a house on fire. Too soon? The Sun printed out warnings of people who owned the painting and that they should get rid of it, lest they find themselves smelling smoke. The story was so popular and people were so invested in the curse of the crying boy that the Sun tried to take it upon themselves to rid London of the curse by, get this, holding a bonfire in which anyone who owned a print of the cursed painting could come, torch it, and hopefully exorcise whatever demons had got into the printing press. The bonfire was a raging success, with sackfuls of the prints being torched, seemingly ending the curse of the crying boy. After hearing about this story though, does anyone else kind of want one of the prints? I don't know, there's something about it. Number 2, the Hope Diamond. The Hope Diamond has shown up more than a few times on this channel, and for good reason. It's considered one of the most haunted rocks on the planet. The diamond was first uncovered in India, with reports purporting that the diamond was plucked from the eye of a statue of the goddess Sita, the goddess of beauty and devotion. Legend has it that the first person who stole the diamond was mauled by dogs shortly after taking it. That's a pretty quick curse. From here, the diamonds passed through countless hands, never staying in one place for too long. It's said to have been owned by King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, who, as far as I know, never had anything too bad happen to her. Nothing worth losing your head over worrying about. That's a little history joke for you. Throughout the diamond's storied history, it's been said that just about every owner suffered a horrific fate. 14 confirmed deaths and owners throughout history, and that's only the ones we know of for sure, as there could be countless more. The jeweler who recut the stone into its current form, William Falls, died a ruined man in poverty and hardship. His son Hendrik stole the stone from his father, who would later be prompted to take his own life for the crime. After passing from owner to owner under grisly circumstances, it made its way to Harry Winston, an American jeweler who, possibly making the only good choice of anyone on this list, thought it better to play with his odds and donated the diamond to the Smithsonian Museum in 1958, where it currently resides, sealed away. The curators of the Smithsonian were thrilled to receive it and have said that they consider the gem a crown jewel, and that in all the time it's been in their watch, no one has suffered any ill effects. Maybe Indiana Jones was right. It belongs in a museum. That's too many Indiana jokes in one video. Too many Indiana jokes. I'm excited about the new one. I can't believe old Harrison Ford's coming back again for the millionth time. He's always coming back. Number 1, Robert the Doll. Every good list of cursed objects should definitely include one cursed doll. I know we had the Shadow Doll up there, but that was like a starter cursed doll. We got better ones. So that's why we're gonna finish up this list for today with a classic haunted doll. Dolls are just inherently a little bit scary when they're not being used for make-believe, and they're especially scary when they carry a series of unfortunate urban legends with them, like the case of Robert the Doll. Maybe you've even heard of Robert the Doll, maybe from this very own channel, maybe from this very own host, because I mentioned him in the first video that I ever did. It's all full circle. He's one of the more notable cursed dolls out there. If you're in the cursed doll community, you probably know him. Robert has been haunting for over a century. He used to be the property of one Robert Jean Otto, although he shared a name with the doll he preferred to be called Otto. Maybe because of the doll he wanted to be called Otto. Anyway, Otto received Robert as a boy from his grandfather, who obtained the doll through unknown means. Trying to trace wherever it came from has proven fruitless, as no toy company has ever been found to have produced it. Now, the young Otto loved Robert and had a very active imagination to a degree that would unsettle his parents. parents. He would refer to the doll in first person and brought it everywhere with him, even dressed it in his own clothing. Otto would say that he would hear Robert talk to him and would see him move. Children who passed the homestead when walking by would say that they claimed that they saw Robert in the windows watching them. Otto would blame all these mishaps on Robert. Injuries, breaks, anything that happened, it was because Robert had told him to do it or that Robert the doll had done it. And this behavior kind of understandably deeply worried Otto's parents. Otto kept Robert until the day of his death in 1974, where he then traveled from home to home, causing a path of misfortune wherever he went until he eventually found himself in the Key West Art and Historical Society, where he's now kept under very tight lock and key and has become the museum's most popular attraction, where visitors leave him offerings, treats, and even writing letters asking for protection or for him to curse others. Employees of the museum say sometimes they feel uncomfortable around him and have noticed a chill in the air by his seat or electrical malfunctions near where he sits. It's been said that they need to stay on his good side lest they provoke his wrath. Maybe it's a good thing then that he's locked up tight in that glass case, and there's just something about this guy. And Robert the doll, if you're watching right now, just want you to know all that stuff I was saying, I was just playing. You know we're friends. You know we've always gone together, you and I. You know I'm a big fan of the scary doll community. I just wanted to make it clear, we're cool.
Number 4 on this list is the Screaming Skull. Last I checked, if there is no meat on the bone, then a skull shouldn't be screaming. That's kind of what's going down with this one extremely haunted skull in Burton Agnes Hall, England. Instablog says, what if you touch an object and then you hear terrible, deafening screams? That is precisely what happens when you touch this skull at an Elizabethan manor in England. Burton Agnes Hall is the house of Catherine Ann Griffith, who was brutally murdered by numerous bullies in 1620. Her skull still rests inside the house. Why? Because whenever somebody tried to take it out of the house, what happened next terrified them to the bone. People who have tried to touch or disturb that skull have reported seeing a scary ghost walk in and utter a deafening scream. This scared the people so much that they actually ran out of the house in terror. If you're up for a scary challenge, then this might be your chance to prove your mettle to the world, but for the weak-hearted ones, it's wise to stay away. And yeah, guys, I mean, I agree with that article right there. Probably best not to mess with this thing. I mean, a bunch of paranormal investigators won't even go here anymore. If a bunch of paranormal investigators think that this area is too scary for them, then sorry guys, I'm tapping out. It's way too scary for me too. Number 3 on this list is the Maori warrior masks. Now these warrior masks hold a curse that won't affect everyone, just a small portion of people. Specifically, women who are soon to be expecting children. The Occult Museum says New Zealand's Maori warriors are part of an ancient tribe who would carve unique masks when it was time for battle. When a man died in the mask, it was believed that his soul would remain trapped in the mask they were wearing. Although their mythology does not dictate that any harm is done by the trapped souls, the presence of the masks has a strange and sometimes fatal effect on pregnant women. Women who are expecting often experience complications when they come in contact with the masks. It's unknown why this phenomenon occurs, but the museum that holds the remaining masks posts a warning that pregnant women should stay away. The literal museum is out here warning pregnant women not to come. That's how you know that this thing's seriously dangerous. Like whenever a business or enterprise does something that's actually gonna lose them money, that's when you have my attention. Considering they just lost an entire demographic of people, I'm now listening and buying into this curse. The paranormal investigators who aren't pregnant have taken a look at this and they're having a hard time getting to the bottom of it. Some people have suggested that the Maori tribe thought that pregnant women were taboo, but that also doesn't really make any sense because then how would they have repopulated their tribe? Regardless of why it is the way that it is, just know that if you are expecting, that's not the right time to take a look at these masks. Number 2 on this list is the Sui Ghost Car. So this is a weird one and definitely something that paranormal investigators are a bit spooked by. List 25 says crashes are common on the A3 highway in England, so it looked like a routine matter when police in Surrey received calls that a car had veered off stop the A3 with its headlights blazing. But when officers went to investigate, they found no signs of the reported vehicle. However, a further search revealed chilling results. Just 60 feet from the reported crash scene, and buried in twisted undergrowth, was the remains of a wrecked car containing a decomposing body of a young man who, as the police estimated, had crashed there 5 months earlier. Therefore, what the witnesses reported might have been a ghostly apparition of the original car. Now, how on earth does that make any sense at all? You know what, let me answer that for you. It doesn't. First off, how did no one notice this car earlier? And then, what was that ghostly apparition that had a car veer off the road? Paranormal investigators are all scared of this one because who knows what type of effect this ghost car could have on your vehicle. And finally, number 1 on this list is the cursed mirror. This mirror isn't just cursed with a bad reflection, it's gonna show you something a lot worse than just you with a little bedhead or something. Instablog says, if you've seen Oculus, then chances are already you're scared of mirrors. And let's not even go back to the time when Bloody Mary was a whole thing. But if these creepy images of mirrors in the horror genre weren't enough, here's a real object which is most likely cursed. In St. Francisville, Louisiana, there's a plantation house which is one of the most haunted houses in America. Inside the house is this mirror, a cursed mirror. Legend goes that the plantation slave brutally killed the owner of the house, named Sarah Woodruff, and her daughters inside the house. Ever since then, they remain trapped inside the mirror. Visitors often report sights of handprints on the mirror, along with some unexplainable strange marks. And the classic haunting is also rumored, figures dressed in white, old-fashioned attire, visible on the other side of the mirror. Some people who have been exposed to this mirror for longer than they should say that these figures in white follow them around too, that they've even seen them appear in other mirrors outside of the plantation, and 1 or 2 of them have talked about how they've seen them outside of a mirror entirely, as if they were standing like right in front of them. It seems like the longer that you're exposed to this, the more of an impact the curse will have on you. Kinda like, I don't know, radiation poisoning or something like that, where the time you spend among the toxin, that's gonna hurt you more. Obviously, because of this, paranormal investigators don't want to spend too long investigating this mirror. A short stint doing some research probably won't hurt you, although it will definitely give you a scare considering you're gonna see the figures on the other side. But extended exposure is where the real danger lies with this cursed item. Number 5 on this list is the die book box. This is an evil box that tormented many people and even claimed some lives along the way. Zach Baggins writes, according to Jewish folklore, a diabook is a dark spirit that takes over the bodies of living people and uses them for evil. Legend has it that a diabook can be trapped inside of a box and prevented from causing mischief unless the box is opened, that is. Several years ago, the diabook box came up for sale on eBay. The seller listed a vintage wine cabinet that came from the estate of a woman who survived a World War II concentration camp. The seller, an antique dealer named Kevin Manis, claimed that the first owner's granddaughter was terrified of the box, warning him that her grandmother said it held a diabook. After buying the cabinet, he was plagued by a series of unfortunate events and recurring nightmares of an old hag that would brutally attack him, causing him to wake up with bruises on his body. He also experienced an overpowering stench of cat urine in his home. Tragically, his mother suffered a stroke while opening the box. Not surprisingly, he decided to get rid of it. The box eventually ended up in the hands of Missouri Medical Museum director Jason Haxton, who was skeptical about the powers attributed to the box. He soon changed his mind. After acquiring the box, he began to experience a series of medical maladies, including bleeding eyes and strange rashes. He also began to dream of being attacked by an old hag and would also awake with bruises on his body. Kevin Manis told me that while the box was in Haxton's basement, a man died there and his body was found lying next to the box. He eventually became so unnerved by the box that he reached out to scientists and rabbis who instructed him to build a wooden ark lined with 24 karat gold, place the box inside, and bury it in the ground. Now, this actually wasn't the end of the story for this box. The box was eventually dug up again and then later donated to a museum. This was after it had tormented a few more people, mind you though. Now it's fully encased placed in a glass covering, but even that doesn't stop the evil spirit from coming after people. Many people who have visited this box have reported having serious episodes in the room while they're looking at it. Whatever spirit is trapped inside this box, it is clearly an extremely powerful one. The box remains on display at the museum, but I wouldn't recommend going to check it out if I was you. Number 4 on this list is the Devil's Rocking Chair. The Devil's Rocking Chair is actually from one of Ed and Lorraine Warren's most famous case, The Devil Made Me Do It. Zach Baggins writes, the horror began in July 1980 when David Glatzel, 11 years old, became possessed by a demon. One night he woke up screaming, claiming that he had been visited by a man with big black eyes, a thin face with animal features, jagged teeth, pointed ears, horns, and hooves. David was, everyone agreed, not the kind of kid who liked scary movies or who was likely to make things up, and he was visibly shaken up by this experience. He became rather withdrawn and quiet. His older sister, Debbie, asked her fiancé, Arn Johnson, if he would stay with her family for a while and see whether it would help David get out of his depression. Arn, of course, agreed, but things didn't get better. David reported having more nightmares about the terrifying man who promised to take his soul. Odd scratches and bruises began to appear on the boy, and all the injuries seemed to happen while he was asleep. Odd sounds, which Arn couldn't explain, were heard in the attic. Worst of all, David began to claim that he was now seeing the beast while he was awake. He was always seen sitting in the family's rocking chair, which the beast now claimed as his own. David was the only one who saw the beast in the chair, but family members often saw it rocking back and forth, seemingly under its own power. This was obviously a lot, so the Warrens were brought in to perform the exorcism. The exorcism took place in that rocking chair, and it's thought that the chair itself still has some evil energy from this spirit attached to it. Now the chair resides at the Haunted Museum, but owner Zach Baggins actually took the exhibit down because the chair was simply too dangerous, he thought. Number 2 on this list is the Unlucky Mummy. Do not get on a boat if said boat is also carrying this mummy. Google Arts and Culture says the Unlucky Mummy isn't actually a mummy, but the mummy board or coffin lid of a high status woman who lived in around 950 to 900 BCE. Discovered in Thebes in the 1800s, the 4 young Englishmen who first purchased the mummy all died in unfortunate circumstances. Rumors of the curse soon spread, and in the early 20th century, journalist William Thomas Steed wrote an article on the jinxed artifact. Steed went on to be one of the passengers on the doomed Titanic. It's said that he told stories of the curse in the run-up to the disaster, with many believing that the mummy itself caused the ship's watery end. Today, the Unlucky Mummy is on display in the British Museum. The Titanic was supposed to be unsinkable. Enter in the Unlucky Mummy, and boom, now the unsinkable ship goes down. Maybe it's a stretch to say that this thing caused the literal Titanic crash, but I can at least guarantee that it probably didn't help. At least this thing is now locked up in a museum very much on land and not connected to any boats that I know of. And number 1 on this list is the Hands Resist Him painting. I'm all about having some cool, groundbreaking art, but this painting definitely crosses the line. The lineup says there is no doubt the painting is disturbing. It shows a young boy standing next to a girl doll with hollow eyes and a sad, downturned mouth. The doll is holding a strange device with wires coming out of it. The eeriest part of the painting are the many disembodied children's hands reaching toward the boy through the glass panels of a door just behind him. But even more disturbing than the painting itself are the stories of what has happened to people who come in contact with it. A few years after the painting was sold, the art critic Henry Seldis died. Then the gallery owner died. Then in 1984, John Marley died. The painting disappeared, not surfacing again until 2000 in a bizarre posting on eBay. The new owners were trying to sell it because they said it was haunted. They claimed the boy and the doll in the picture would fight with each other during the night, terrifying their 4-year-old daughter. They set up a motion sensing camera in the room for 3 nights and claimed they had captured the boy in the picture, leaving the frame and coming into the room, apparently fleeing in terror. The literal kid in the painting is leaving. not freaking cool, guys. My paintings are supposed to be static and not moving, and they definitely aren't supposed to be walking around my home scaring the living bejesus out of me and my family. Apparently, this painting is locked up in a storage locker now, and no one is allowed to see it.
Number 5. Uluru Rock. If you're heading down under for a vacation this year, well, there's a certain object that remains very cursed there that people don't really recommend you tamper with. And it's huge. Uluru Rock. Yeah, this massive sandstone monolith in Australia was discovered on paper in 1873 by surveyor William Goss. He named the landmark Ayers Rock in honor of the then Chief Secretary of South Australia, Sir Henry Ayers. Known as such, of course, until 1993 when it was officially renamed to Uluru, honoring the title originally given to the Anangu First Nations peoples, to whom the site is sacred and, more importantly, home. This thing is strange. First off, this place is highly sacred, stumbled upon by the First Nations people of the northern Aussie area for who knows how long. This site has been known over the eons to have strange powers though, i.e. any tampering, stealing, defacing, or slandering the megalith is a sure way to test your luck against, well, the universe. This place shouldn't be messed with. One man stole a chunk of rock from the monument and experienced so much bad luck that he actually drove 3,000 kilometers to return it in person, in an attempt to rid himself of the karma he believed was attached to him. The chip was returned 40 years later. The largest piece of rock that was ever returned back to the site weighed more than 70 pounds. Yeah, this is serious stuff. First off, how the hell did you sneak that off the site? Like, did he just back his truck up to it like, yeah, just chip that big rock off, put it all in. He apparently wrote, "Dear Australia, I am so sorry I took this piece of Uluru. I wanted a piece of Australia to take home with me, and this was the wrong thing to take. I hope Australia can forgive me and welcome me if I ever come back. Signed, an unwise traveler." Yeah, the reason they advise visitors not to take anything is the paranormal omens connected to said rock. Also, this is a giant rock we're looking at, like only 1/10 of its mass you can see. It's like an iceberg, like underground. So before you experience any bad luck, illness, or karma beyond karma any day soon, I'd just collect seashells and skip this whole thing. No? Number 4, the Voic Manuscript. As always, if you like what we do here at Top 5 Scary, make sure to hit that like button down below or comment down below which archaeological find you know of that has impending doom upon the discoverer. I love this stuff. It's scary beyond all belief, but it's interesting. We're all about it here. And speaking of, so apparently there's a giant Italian Renaissance-ish folio called the Voic Manuscript. It's named after Wilfrid Voynich, a Polish-Lithuanian book dealer who purchased it in 1912. Yeah, we don't really know what this thing is. One thing it most certainly is would be the most bizarre and mysterious book of all time. 100%. Not only is it detailed so carefully and patiently, it's all like Tim Burton-like, with an entire world drawn and recorded that isn't ours. Like, is this a parallel universe book? Is this language even known? Like, it's unknown, like predates Latin and doesn't even use phonetic patterns and coding. It's the riddle of all riddles. Written in the 15th century, somewhere they think between 1405 and 1450, all 240 pages are inscribed in some sort of indecipherable language, with a small alphabet only of about 170,000 characters. Yeah, it's gonna take a while for them to crack this one. The contents alone have cursed people mad, with obscure visions and obsessions for years. My precious. Historians and cartographers have tried to crack the code for hundreds of years, yet not one has been successful. Why wasn't this a national treasure movie? I feel like this would have been perfect. Was it written by people from another world? An unknown species? It's so familiar yet so alien. Radiocarbon dating from the University of Arizona proved for all pages tested that once started, the writing was continuous for like 20 years. Protein testing revealed that the parchment was actually skin. About 150 calves slain for this Goliath mystery. It remains at Yale, waiting to be decoded to this day. Creepy! Number 3, metal balls. So, metallic floating shiny balls have been recorded for years. Giant metallic balls like this have been found literally littered around the planet for decades, apparently. Ufologist and professor at Stanford Gary Nolan is currently studying these metal Malteser-looking things right now that people have collected and auctioned off since the 50s. Right now in Texas, there's a dude who has a ton of these apparent real alien tech. Jim Marlin, famous music producer, was given these metal giant pinball-looking spheres by a celebrity's bodyguard, apparently, who said that they were dropped from a craft in his backyard in the early 50s. And like, a lot of celebrities have touched these. Dennis Hopper, Jane Fonda, that's Hollywood, people. These things are famous on their own. They also move on their own, and apparently hold power and light up once in a while on their own. Yeah. That's not scary at all. Hey Dad, after Survivor, can you just move your metal giant floating balls out of the living room? Yeah, Mom asked me to ask you. In the 70s, the Betts family of Florida came across a small metal sphere the size of a bowling ball in the woods behind their house. Their first thought was the sphere was an old cannonball from a battle. They decided to take the sphere home, and when the sphere seemed to react to the sound of music in the house, making a throbbing, pulsating noise, later the sphere was even seen rolling on its own and would even stop and change direction in the house. Yeah, that's terrifying. Even the Navy went there and checked out these giant mysterious metal orbs. Every time I'm on Reddit seeing these like light orbs trucking around the skies, I can't help but think, is that them? Like that's them. One thing's for sure, they don't seem to be made here. Number 2, the Antikythera Mechanism. The Antikythera Mechanism is an anomaly on its own. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, it's basically an ancient computer that uses the cosmos to predict astronomical events. Thought to have been the first analog computer ever created, and no, it wasn't made in a garage in 1997 somewhere. It was invented by who knows who, like 2,000 years ago. Captain Dimitrios Kontos and his crew of sea sponge divers discovered the Antikythera shipwreck in early 1900 just off Antikythera in Greece, hence the name. I also find it hilarious that divers diving for something you wipe your butt with found an ancient computer. Like, something about that just amuses me. They recovered tons of artifacts during the expedition, helping pull up the shipwreck and this precious baby. Many thought it was cursed immediately after its first handlings. Apparently after its discovery, 3 of the divers who dove down died shortly after its find. Presumably of course of the bends of overwork, but locals think this device was to blame. At 150 feet deep, just off Point Glyphadia, the Greek island, the team retrieved millions in bronze and marble statues, pottery, glassware, jewelry, coins, and this ancient mechanism. It was a find of a century and still is. The device is made entirely out of a single bronze sheet, built in a wooden case about the size of a shoebox. The case and its faces are covered with Greek inscriptions, which indicate the device's astronomical and calendrical purpose. It's basically a computer built entirely out of cogs, wheels, gears, and faces, and it would tell you where you were amongst the cosmos. The first alarm clock, computer, calendar hybrid. Again, 2,200 years ago. Like, no machinery, no watches, no laser cutters, basically everything we have in our iPhones right now within a wooden box 2,000 years ago. Again, it's funny, they were collecting sea sponges to wipe our butts and then stumbled upon a computer. Yeah. You can find it at the National Archaeological Museum of Athens. And number 1, the Codex Gigas. Obviously, this one's gonna be my number 1 pick. Apparently it translates to giant book, and it's big. It weighs about 170 pounds. Yeah, I'm kind of like really uncomfortable what I've learned and read about this book. It's the largest medieval manuscript in the world. The manuscript is also known as the Devil's Bible due to its highly unusual full-page portrait and detail of Satan and the legends surrounding its creation. Illuminated Bibles were a typical feature of Roman monastic books, but even with this one, the page size alone of the Gigas is notably larger for its time, and it's made out of about 180 donkeys. Yeah, sorry. Poor little guys. The most famous myth is that the scribe traded his soul to the Prince of Darkness himself so that he could complete the book in only one night. Everything within the book has been handwritten by a single anonymous person. Created in the early 13th century in the Benedictine monastery of Bohemia, now modern-day Czech Republic, this book holds demonic power. The manuscript contains the complete Bible, Old and New Testaments, as well as all medicinal and cosmological knowledge, all written in Latin, and predated glyphs. However, it is, unbeknownst to any of us, missing 10 pages. Yeah, just ripped out missing. It's like a movie right there. Apparently some think the Codex was created by Herman the Recluse in the Benedictine monastery in the Czech Republic before being stolen and taken to Prague by the Emperor Rudolf II, who, fun fact, also stole the Voic Manuscript at one point. Yeah, this guy loved collecting like cursed, demonic, haunted scriptures, I guess. According to legend, the scribe was a monk who promised to create in one night a book to glorify the monastery forever, including all human knowledge. Near midnight, he became sure that he couldn't complete this task alone, so whipped out his pen and made a deal with Lucifer, asking him to help him finish the book in exchange for his soul. That's not really a good idea. It's thought it would have taken him at least 30 years non-stop writing to complete it. The book lays in the National Library of Sweden in Stockholm, where it is on display for the general public. Dude, I can't read Goosebumps without having nightmares, let alone going near this thing? Nah, I'm good.
Number 5 on this list is Long Lost Friend. This book is really interesting because even though there are multiple copies around the world, there's only one particular copy that has a serious curse to it. The book itself was written in 1820 by John George Homan and is basically a collection of spells and other folk remedies that would be very useful if you were running a farm. A lot of the content in the book has to do with healing livestock and casting a spell to have better yields come the harvest. One copy of this book, though, was pretty much directly responsible for the murder of its owner. Oren Gray writes, while the book itself is intended to be benign, containing as it does wonderful and well-tested remedies and arts for men as well for livestock according to its original German title, the tome took on a rather sinister reputation following the so-called Hex Hollow murder committed by John Blymer, John Curry, and Wilbert Hess. The three men broke into the home of their neighbor Nelson Raymer because they said he'd put a curse on them and they were trying to find his copy of the Long Lost Friend and destroy it in order to end their affliction. Unable to do so, they instead killed Raymer and attempted to burn down his house. Raymer's supposed copy of the book never turned up. After this incident had happened, the men sort of came to their senses and it felt to them as if they'd been under a spell and lost their minds for a little while. People have theorized that the single copy of the Long Lost Friend that Nelson Raymer had owned was cursed, and through its curse had basically set this tragic event in motion. Similar to the One Ring in Lord of the Rings, after it sabotaged its owner, it went into hiding and now no one knows where this book went. Hopefully it stays hidden and the curse it holds is never brought to the light again. Number 4 on this list is The Orphan Story. The Orphan Story is one of the few entries on this list where the subject matter isn't too demonic or troubling in nature. It's, as the title would suggest, a story about an orphan who at 14 years old leaves Spain to go on some adventures. The curse with this book seems to be when someone studies it. The story was written by Martin de Leon Cardenas in the early 1600s and since then has racked up the death toll for those who've worked on the book. A Peruvian academic, Belinda Palacios, has said, "I laughed it off, but I was a bit apprehensive at the same time. It's taken a while because the people who've worked on it have died, one from a strange disease, one in a car accident, and another of something else. A book that if you spend extensive time with it will inevitably lead to your death. No one knows where this curse originally started from. Potentially the author had written something into the book where if somebody spends a long time with the work, they'll eventually suffer a grim fate. Or potentially through the years of its publication, the book has had something sinister happen to it that then caused those who worked on it to suffer greatly. I find it very interesting that this curse only seems to apply to those that study or put great effort into the book. From what I've read, those who just simply read the book for pleasure will be fine. That being said, any book that has the potential to curse me with death is something that I'd like to keep off my reading list. Number 3 on this list is Tominos Hell. Tominos Hell is one of the most famous works from the Japanese poet Sajo Yaso, but it's famous for all the wrong reasons. It's not actually a book, so I'm leaving the parameters of this video a little bit, but it is a one-page poem that has dire consequences if read aloud. It was initially released in 1919 and started to gain some popularity because those who read it felt very troubled and uneasy when doing so. The poem's subject matter is very disturbing and graphic, and it's understandable why it would make somebody feel uneasy. It's about a child named Tomino who lived amongst abusive parents and decided to write all of her sorrows into a poem. That poem is found by her parents and they respond by locking her up in a cage and not feeding her. Eventually she dies from disease and malnourishment. So the poem itself is pretty bloody depressing to begin with. Throw on the fact that when you read it out loud you actually get cursed, and now we have one of the most dangerous pieces of writing in the world. Tominos Hell, if you read out the poem in its entirety out loud, is said to curse you forever. The curse ranges in severity and can come in the form of almost anything. Illness, financial ruin, accidents, death of a loved one, or even death of yourself are all in the potential cards for what might happen if you read this poem out loud. One of the most famous instances of this is filmmaker Suji Terayama, who made a movie based on the poem and then shortly died soon afterwards due to illness. There have been countless others who have suffered similar fates after reading this poem as well. I've actually avoided reading the poem even silently while I was doing this entry and just read people's descriptions on it. For your safety and your family's safety, I recommend that you avoid it as well. Number 1 on this list is the Grand Grimoire. The Grand Grimoire is considered by some to be the most dangerous book on the planet. The exact date this book was written is unknown, with some estimates putting its first publication in the early 1400s, but other experts saying that it was probably written some 500 years after that. The writer of this book is thought to be Antonio del Rabina, who, other than writing this grimoire, pretty much a complete mystery. The Key of Solomon and the Lesser Key of Solomon are are often on people's most cursed books list, and much of the teachings in the Grand Grimoire was taken from those original texts. This book, the Grand Grimoire, serves only one evil purpose. It teaches someone how to summon and make a pact with the devil. Wikipedia writes, the work is divided into two books. The first book contains instructions for summoning a demon and for the construction of tools with which to force the demon to do one's bidding. The second book is further divided into two parts, the Sanctum Regnum and Secrets. The Sanctum Regnum contain instructions for making a pact with the demon, allowing one to command the spirit without the tools required in book 1, but at greater risk. Secrets contain simpler spells and rituals one can employ after having performed the ritual in the first book. Some editions contain a short text between those two parts dealing with necromancy. The book describes several demons as well as the rituals to summon them in order to make a pact with them. It also details several spells for winning the lottery, talking to spirits, being loved by a girl, or making oneself invisible. This book is made to be an evil cheat code to life, something that somebody can use to hack the game and get a leg up at everything. And don't get me wrong, winning the lottery would be a pretty cool superpower to have, but at what cost? How much of my soul am I gonna have to sell to a demon to get that done? How do I know that I'm gonna perform these spells properly? Like, if I'm an amateur, then I could very easily screw something up and fatally injure myself in the process. Also, summoning the devil is never the best idea to begin with either. This book is just far too powerful and far too sinister for humans to have access to.
Coming in at number 5, we have Demon House Staircase. The Demon House in Gary, Indiana was the center of a docudrama in 2018. Zach Bagans tells the story of a family struggling with the hauntings and even possessions that happened in the home. It is claimed that the house contains around 200 spirits. The Gary Police Department investigated on numerous occasions, and priests even performed numerous exorcisms. When the family first moved into the home despite cold December temperatures, large black flies swarmed their screened-in porch, and they kept coming back even when the family killed them and killed them. After that, they started to hear footsteps around the house going up and down from the basement. They claimed things got worse from there when the demons attached to the children. They said that the kids' eyes bulged, their voice deepened, and they sported evil smiles while possessed. One of the family members described what it felt like to be killed and walked up the wall in the presence of their family case manager and hospital nurse. Once Zach investigated the goings on in the house, it was decided it would be best to bulldoze the home. However, he did keep pieces of the home, such as the staircase, to store away in his museum. In at number 4, we have Peggy the Doll. It is said that even just looking at a picture of Peggy can cause hauntings, from your computer freezing to the room going cold and light bulbs blowing out whenever you mention the doll. The first known owner of the doll started having dreams haunted by the doll. She would wake up feeling hot and shaken. No matter where she moved the doll, the dreams persisted. She called in the help of 2 local priests, but after 2 visits the dreams still persisted. After suffering a fever and hallucinations, she sought help from the Haunted Doll Museum. Their team then set out to get to the bottom of these hauntings. They came to the conclusion that the woman had been possessed by the spirit of a woman born in 1946 in London, who died of a chest condition, possibly asthma. They had psychic mediums study the doll, and they all concluded Peggy was restless, frustrated, and previously persecuted, possibly with ties to the Holocaust. Peggy was on display for some time with the Haunted Doll Museum, and there were further reports of her coming to people in their dreams. She was since purchased by the Zach Bagans Haunted Museum in Vegas, where she is currently locked away in a display. Coming in at number 3, the Mummy's Curse. Technically, the Mummy's Curse is not on the actual mummy, but on the lid that once held her. It is unknown who was once held within it, but it was a woman of a high status from the 21st or 22nd dynasty, 950 to 900 BC. The curse has a few stories attached to it, and some even think that she caused the disaster of the Titanic. This mysterious mummy was found at Thebes in the late 1800s. It was brought in by 4 young Englishmen who all had untimely deaths. 2 of the men died in shooting accidents, and the other 2 died of poverty. A string of illnesses, accidents, and deaths followed by anyone who came into contact with the mummy. The most shocking claim is that some survivors of the Titanic blame the mummy for the sinking. Among the passengers of the Titanic was journalist William Thomas Stead, who had published a few articles about the curse. The survivors recalled Stead discussing the artifact and its curse over dinner. It is claimed he had purchased a ticket for himself to transport the artifact to New York. As the stories were told, its reputation grew, and many believed its presence on board caused the disaster. It is believed that in the chaos, someone bribed one of the guards to sneak the artifact onto a lifeboat to save the historic piece. Not long after arriving, the unlucky mummy was soon causing mayhem and misery at the home of its American owner, so he decided to send her back to Britain. Luckily, it is now safely locked away currently on display at the British Museum in London. However, visitors do still report unsettling sensations when viewing the unlucky mummy's coffin lid. In at number 2 we have James Dean's Porsche. You don't hear of many haunted cars, but James Dean's Porsche has taken enough lives to be taken very seriously. As soon as James got his car, some people had a bad feeling around it, so Alec Guinness met with James for lunch and he showed him the car. Alec commented, I quote, "If you get in that car, you'll be found dead in it by this time next week," and within the week, he was. This was just the start of the car's curse. When a mechanic attempted to repair the car, it fell and crushed his legs. The car's new owner decided to sell the engine and drivetrain to 2 racers. One of the racers lost control of his car, hit a tree, and died instantly. The other was injured when his car locked up and rolled over. 2 thieves tried to take pieces of the car, but they were both injured during the robbery. The car was then donated to the safety exhibit of the California Highway Patrol. The exhibit caught fire and the car had to be moved to a different exhibit. At the second exhibit, the car fell onto a student, breaking his hip. This meant that it was moved once again. It even managed to crush and kill a truck driver who was transporting it. It was since stolen, and there has been reports that the new owner is keeping the car hidden away, hopefully to stop any further damage.
Number 5 on this list is King Tut's Mask. The curse of King Tut is one of the most famous curses to surround a tomb ever. King Tut was a pharaoh in ancient Egypt who boasted one of the most ornate tombs in history. This tomb carried a curse though, and those who entered it suffered fatal consequences. On the pyramids of Giza, there's a very specific curse written on the entrance. It reads, "All people who enter this tomb who will make evil against this tomb and destroy it, may the crocodile be against them in the water and snakes against them on land. May the hippopotamus be against them in water, the scorpion on land." This curse stuck with those who entered. It all started with Howard Carter, the leader of the team, whose canary was eaten by a cobra the second that they first entered the tomb. Then the person who financed the whole excavation died shortly afterwards. And from there, a domino effect occurred where many others involved suffered horrible tragedies or passed away. Some speculate though that it wasn't actually the act of opening the tomb that sparked this curse, but it was what they did with King Tut's mask. King Tut had a burial mask on when he was mummified and put in his tomb. The mask is beautiful. It's meant to resemble the person it's on so that the gods can recognize him and bring him up to heaven. Inside the mask is a bunch of oils and materials that are said to help preserve the body. All of this is all well and good, but on the back of the mask is an inscription. This inscription is said to be a curse similar to the one on the pyramids of Giza. Well, if that wasn't enough, then there's a rumor this mask was broken during the excavation process and had to be reassembled when they took it back to their headquarters. Opening the tomb is already problematic, but to then break the mask of King Tut that has a curse inscribed on it, that's just asking for trouble. Number 4 on this list is King Casmir IV's coffin. King Casmir was born in 1427 into royalty. By 1440, when he would have only been 13, Casmir was named the Grand Duke of Lithuania, and only 7 years later in 1447 became the fully fledged King of Poland. He stood as the King of Poland right up until the day he died. Oftentimes, kings don't make it right up until their death, but King Casmir's success was pretty historic. He's known in Polish history as being one of the most politically active and prosperous kings to ever rule over their country. During his reign, he won several wars, recovered territories for Poland, and made their royal family one of the leaders in Europe. Due to all of the glory that he received in his life, it was only fitting that he have a tomb that reflected this. He died when he was 65 years old in 1492 and was put to rest in the chapel of Wawel Castle. There he lay for roughly 500 years until 1973. Researchers opened the tomb to find a horrible surprise. The researchers opened this tomb and investigated the mummification process and all the artifacts he was buried with. They took his body and coffin out of this place and brought it back to their lab. What they didn't realize though was that this coffin had a curse to it. It's estimated that over 15 people died who worked on researching this body and this coffin. It took a while before they realized what was causing this death, but eventually they discovered the error of their ways. You see, the coffin was cursed, but it wasn't cursed with anything ghostly, it was cursed with Aspergillus flavus. Cursed is also a misleading word to use in this instance as well, because Aspergillus flavus is actually a pathogenic fungus. A fungus that when exposed to people can become a killer. For a long time, people thought that there truly was an ancient curse surrounding this coffin, but it was actually this fungus that kept preying on people's immune systems. Eventually, King Casmir's body was taken and put back into his tomb, but not before the damage had been done and over 15 people had lost their lives. Number 2 on this list is King Tut's statuettes. King Tut's tomb didn't just have one cursed item, it had multiple. His burial mask is pretty widely known, but many don't know the story of 2 statuettes that also came from this tomb. These were 2 small bronze statues found inside the tomb. One of them with their hand over their heart and the other one with their hand over their mouth. Lord Carnarvon, the man who funded the initial excavation, gave these to a friend as a gift. This was meant to be in good faith and a friendly gesture, but he had no idea the trouble that they would cause. The name of the family is omitted in this story to protect their integrity, and the person who received the statues is simply referred to as James. James received these statues and brought them back to America with him, but then started to suffer the consequences. Once wildly successful, James started to lose everything: his company, his money, his family. James went through 3 failed marriages, a complete collapse of his immense fortune, and finally died of illness without ever realizing these statues were part of the problem. He left them to his grandson in his will, and the curse continued. When his grandson took hold of these statues, he was a decorated Olympian, but he also suffered a serious fall from grace. Injuries, other accidents, and failed business ventures plagued the grandson from the second that he took hold of these statues until finally he called the museum. He donated them to the museum so that they could be put with some of the other King Tut pieces and the curse could finally be lifted from his family. Now, it's certainly possible that this was all a coincidence and this family just got down on their luck at the wrong time, but anything involving King Tut has the potential to be cursed, and I wouldn't be surprised if these statues were part of that.
Number 5. The Ring of Sylvanas. The Vine Ring, aka the Ring of Sylvanas, is a gold ring dating back to the 4th century AD. The ring was discovered in the fields of a farm in 1785 in Hampshire, England. Originally the property of a British Roman named Sylvanus, apparently it was stolen by a person named Senicianus, upon which Sylvanus hexed the ring with a curse. That's right. In 1888, the owner of the property wrote about the ring in a history of his property, which is now a National Trust property. The ring went on display there in April 2013, where it's been ever since. Oddly, in 1929, during excavations of the site of the Roman Temple of Nodens at Lydney Park, archaeologist Sir Mortimer Wheeler discovered the now apparent curse that goes with said ring. Consulting shortly after with one J.R.R. Tolkien. That's interesting. The ring is apparently much larger than most rings as well and was perhaps made to be worn over gloves. The band of the ring has 10 edges. Among it is the goddess Venus engraved, along with the saying, "Live in God." Yeah, that's pretty awesome. The lore goes, while at the temple, Sylvanus' gold ring vanished. Believing the thief to be an individual named Senicianus, Sylvanus demanded supernatural justice. And at the Temple of Nodens, crafted and carved a hexed tablet known as the Curse Tablet, or Defixio. On the tablet, he wrote, quote, "For the god Nodens, Sylvanus has lost a ring and has donated 1/2 of its worth to Nodens. Among those named Senicianus, permit no good health until it is returned to the Temple of Nodens." Yeah, that sounds like a spell to me. You better return that, buddy. Nodens is like Poseidon. Yeah, that's not good if he's out there looking for you. Number 4. Tutankhamun's Trumpets. The trumpets are a pair that were first found in the burial chamber of the 18th dynasty pharaoh, famously known as King Tut. One sterling silver and one bronze. They are considered to be the oldest operational trumpets in the world, and the only known surviving examples from ancient Egypt. The trumpets were found in 1922 by Howard Carter during the excavation of Tutankhamun's tomb. Yeah, you know, the whole cursed tomb thing. The bronze trumpet was discovered in the tomb's antechamber in a large chest containing other military objects and walking sticks. The silver trumpet was found in the actual burial chamber. Both are engraved with decorative images of the gods. Similar looking trumpets feature in Egyptian wall paintings that are usually, but not always, but most associated with military and war. Silent for more than 3,000 years, the trumpets were played for a live audience of 150 million people through a BBC broadcast live in 1939. And then World War II happened. Because apparently the curator of the Tutankhamun collection at the Egyptian Museum says whenever someone blows into it, a war occurs. The same thing happened in 1967 and the 1991 Gulf War when a student was doing research on Tutankhamun's collection and gave her a whirl. Yeah. The bronze trumpet was one of the artifacts stolen from the Egyptian Museum in Cairo during the Egyptian looting riots in 2011 and then, hilariously enough, returned weeks later. Yeah, apparently it's like really cursed. Like haunted cursed. Guy didn't want it anymore. Shocker. Number 3, the Statue of Osiris. And speaking of ancient Egypt, we arrive yet again at something stolen. The Statue of Osiris. In 1971, during an excavation in Saqqara, Egyptologist Walter Bryan Emery found a small statue of the Egyptian god of death, Osiris. He and his assistant returned to the dig site's office in a nearby village as Emery took the statue of Osiris with him. Once at his house, Emery went to the bathroom to shower, and after moments, his assistant began to hear Emery screaming. He found him clutching the sink, clearly experiencing some kind of trauma. His assistant said that Emery stood there paralyzed. I grabbed him by the shoulders and dragged him onto the couch. Then I ran for the telephone. Emery was diagnosed with paralysis of the right side of his body and was unable to speak. He actually died the following day. Talk about curse of the pharaohs. It's been said that there was a possession of a Canadian woman who believed her home had also become haunted by said statue. The woman gave it to the Ontario Museum, which returned it home to Egypt. Have we seen this video of said statue moving on its own? Like, this is from a Manchester museum, and this thing is just moving on its own all day. Yeah, this god's pretty powerful, and this stuff needs to be respected, you know? And returned. Like, you can't just steal stuff and throw it up in a museum overseas. Especially the stuff that clearly says in hieroglyphics, do not remove this, you will be cursed. We're uncovering more and more buried Egypt every day. Just please be respectful and leave the stuff alone after discovering and documenting it. And whatever you do, don't play any more instruments, okay? And coming in at number 1, the Wailing Skull. Our number 1 spot, of course, the one that scares me the most. Skull banshees screaming throughout the middle of the night. Oh yeah. Just screeching ghost heads. You know this is a thing, right? Like way more common than we think. Like they're like everywhere. Burton Agnes Hall is in East Yorkshire, was built in 1598 during the reign of Elizabeth I by 3 sisters of the Griffith family. The youngest sister, Anne, was apparently attacked. They beat her after she apparently refused to give them her belongings. Locals heard her cries and came to her rescue and returned her home, though sadly perishing 5 days later. On her deathbed, she requested that the head be placed within the walls of the unfinished manor. The family ignored her request, and after she was buried and the house's construction was complete, the sisters began to hear sinister noises throughout the empty house. Well, screams, actually. The sisters returned to their family's vault to fulfill the past sister's request, and when they opened the tomb, the body was completely intact except for the now smiling skull across the room from the body. Okay, the head was taken back to the Burton Agnes Hall and miraculously, the noises and disturbances stopped. It's like she asked to be there or something. The noises would only happen again when later residents tried to remove the skull from the premises. Yeah, I'd put that back immediately. Don't mess with people's scary like this, you know? The skull was later cemented in the walls for safety. Yeah, I'd hope so. Although the noises have stopped, Anne still makes a ghostly appearance apparently on the anniversary of her death. I don't know why people go around touching things, moving them around, like leave them where they layeth, you know?